Ms. Maloy.
First of all, thank you all for being here. This has been a long hearing. I had to leave and come back, and you've been here the whole time, so I appreciate your stamina. Ms. Benford, I want to build on something you talked about. When you were talking about how the states need flexibility and every state's not the same, you mentioned Wyoming and the long distances people have to travel along stretches of highway. I represent Utah, and we have similar problems, and in some parts of my district, similar weather. So I'm just going to put in a shameless plug here. I have a bipartisan bicameral bill called the More DOT Grants Act that would help address some of the problems you talked about with states being unable to meet the matching requirements for some of these grants, particularly in rural areas and rural areas with a lot of public land where they don't have the tax base to come up with the matching, but they have the same need to maintain roads. So for your associates who are struggling with this in rural areas, have them look into the bill and talk to their representatives. But I agree that states need flexibility. Not all states are the same. One of the things that I think applies to everybody, and I want to hear from everyone on the panel about this, that you talked about, Ms. Benford, is CEQ and the slow permitting reform. Permitting reform is one of the things I love to talk about. I think there are a lot of things we could do that would not be environmentally harmful at all, that would save the taxpayers a lot of time and money in process. So I just want to go down the panel starting at this end and work to the other end. What permitting reforms would be helpful to you that wouldn't harm any of our environmental protections, but would make things move faster so that we're keeping up with inflation and the costs of building these projects?
Thank you for that question. I would agree that the CEQ did have good, implemented a few permitting efficiencies, and I think that that's important that we take those to heart, like setting deadlines, page limits, and making sure that we actually answer the questions in a timely manner so that the projects can proceed. Again, I talk a lot about, collaboration, and that's a big piece of it, making sure that all of our partners are collaborating and meeting their deadlines so that we can continue forward with our work.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker?
Congresswoman, if you may, if I may, can I pass my baton here to the Secretary first?
Sure.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think what we need first and foremost is adequate funding of federal resource agencies so that they're staffed appropriately to respond to the regulations that they're charged with. What I find quite often, it's not the regulation that's slowing us down, is that there's nobody there to review the data and get the report done and get the work taken care of. So yeah, I think the rules are the rules, but what slows me down is when we actually, as a DOT, we provide our funding to resource agencies so that they can staff and do the work they need to do for us. If they were funded and staffed appropriately, I think you'd see things move a lot faster.
I've seen the same problem in projects that I've worked on, and I appreciate the answer. I would submit that if the permitting regulations weren't so onerous, we wouldn't require as much staffing time. And so we could solve that problem on both ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think on the maritime space, as I mentioned earlier, not so much directly permitting, but improving the NEPA process, not to avoid the NEPA process in any state, but to modernize it. And in particular with the Maritime Administration to modernize, which hasn't, to my understanding, on certain exclusions happened since 1985.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.